What if the very neighbors you thought you could ignore decided to cage you in your own home? Click. That's the sharp sound of a padlock clamping shut on my gate. Gravel crunches under heavy boots as hired guards walk away, leaving me stranded on my own land like some outlaw. Diesel fumes hang in the mountain air from trucks that suddenly can't roll home. Imagine this, a stubborn 58-year-old widower who's fought tooth and nail for the ground his grandfather left him, now branded unfit by Victoria. Clipboard in hand, smug smile plastered across her face, and literally locked inside his own community. Big mistake. What Victoria and her little army never bothered to check was that weather-stained concrete bridge every soul relies on to get in or out. That one fragile link? Every inch of it is mine. So tell me, what would you do if your neighbors turned the key on your own property? Ever been caged by your own HOA? My name is Ezra Blackwood, and 6 months ago I thought nothing could hurt worse than losing Margaret, my wife of 40 years. Her death left a hole in me bigger than these mountains. So I did what broken men do. I ran. I left Denver, packed up our life, and retreated to my grandfather's old cabin at Pine Ridge Estates, where the air still carries pine and frost. Scattered across the slope, 47 high-end homes cling to the mountainside, all bound to the world by that one bridge. My bridge, though I didn't realize it then. Most residents are weekend tourists or retirees in designer flannel, playing mountain man. A handful of us live here year-round, keeping to ourselves. The loose HOA once just took care of snow. Once. Then came Victoria Thornfield, 52, fresh from Denver, trailing her smug lawyer husband Marcus and their arrogant son Bradley, who eyed my land like a prize. Victoria lived by one creed. She was born to rule lesser mortals. Word was she wanted my acres for a condo developer's Mountain View fantasy. Within half a year, she'd clawed her way into the HOA presidency. Her mission? Elevating community standards. Translation, driving out anyone who didn't fit her glossy suburb dream. The first sign of war was the click of her heels on my porch. Cream pantsuit, leather portfolio, Bradley smirking at her side. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, skipping greetings, "I'm here about your property compliance issues." I glanced out across my grandfather's 40 acres. The hand-built log cabin workshop had seen 3 generations mend everything from tractors to broken hearts alongside the gardens that had sustained us since the 1940s. "What issues?" I asked. She snapped open her portfolio like a prosecutor in court. "Your cabin needs a fresh coat of paint. That workshop is an eyesore. And those gardens completely unsuitable for a community of this level. Honestly, the whole place drags down property values." Now, I'm not a man quick to anger. Margaret always said I had the patience of a saint, but the stubbornness of a mule. Still, hearing her insult 3 generations of sweat and love made my blood boil. The creak of my grandfather's rocking chair seemed to echo warnings in the mountain breeze. "This cabin has been in my family for 80 years, I told her calmly. "My grandfather built it by hand. My father raised me here. And you want me to change it just because it doesn't fit your suburban daydreams?" Victoria's smile was as sharp as shattered glass. "Mr. Blackwood, we all have sentimental ties, but progress always comes with sacrifice. Surely you see that." "Oh, I understand," I said evenly. The answer, no. She shut the portfolio with a snap. Bradley laughed behind her. "We'll see about that." 2 weeks later, an official envelope showed up in my mailbox. Some concerned citizen had filed complaints with Jefferson County about unpermitted structures on my land. The inspector, a nervous kid who apologized every other sentence, explained that every building needed updated permits and surveys. My morning coffee turned bitter as I added up the $3,200 in fees for paperwork on buildings that had stood longer than most Pine Ridge residents had been alive. Victoria's opening shot. But here's what she didn't realize about the Blackwoods. We don't bow to bullies. My grandfather fought off claim jumpers in these mountains. My father battled crooked county officials who tried to steal our water rights. That night, sitting in the workshop surrounded by 8 decades of family history, I knew Victoria Thornfield had picked the wrong fight. Her words stung worse than the mountain wind, but I wasn't about to give her the victory. She thought I was some grieving old fool ready to vanish. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Ever had a neighbor try to control your life? Wait until you hear what I did next. Victoria didn't waste time celebrating her permit win. 3 days after I paid that $3,200, she struck again, this time with a surveyor, her brother-in-law of course, to redraw the property lines. I was sipping coffee when I heard the whir of his equipment cutting through the mountain silence. From my kitchen window, I saw him grinning like Victoria while setting up his flimsy transit on what I knew for certain was my land. "Morning," I called, stepping outside, steam curling from my mug into the cold air. "Care to tell me why you're trespassing?" Victoria's brother-in-law had the surveying ability of a busted GPS and twice the arrogance. "We're resurveying community green space," he said without looking up. "Seems there's been confusion about the boundaries." "No confusion here," I shot back. "My line runs 20 feet past that oak tree. Been that way since 1943, long before this neighborhood ever existed." Finally he looked at me, that family smirk spreading wider, like he was enjoying every second. He smirked like it was some private joke. "Well, according to our instruments, you've been trespassing on community land for years. Amazing what real equipment can uncover." His younger assistant looked uneasy, shuffling notes and glancing between him and me. Smart kid. He could sense the scam even if he didn't dare name it. Within hours, Victoria's brother-in-law had magically redrawn my boundary, shrinking my property by 20 feet. By the next day, a crew arrived, driving posts into the frozen ground. An 8-foot privacy fence rose, not along the disputed line, but 15 feet deep into my land. The thud of each post struck like gunfire across the mountain. Each one pierced Margaret's memory like a blade. The fence cut off our family's hiking trail and cast its shadow over my workshop, stealing the morning light that had warmed it for 80 years. Mrs. Holloway showed up around 3 o'clock with a thermos of coffee and that look people wear when they know trouble's brewing. She gripped my arm tighter than I expected. "This isn't right, Ezra," she whispered. "That fence is clearly on your land. We're behind you, sweetheart." Then she shot a nervous glance toward Victoria's house, where curtains quivered upstairs, and hurried off like she feared being caught siding with the enemy. That night I called Becker and Associates, the most trusted surveyors in the county. Tom Becker himself had handled cases that ended up in court. It cost me $800 I couldn't spare, but by Friday I held proof as solid as stone. Victoria's fence sat 15 feet inside my boundary. That's when 40 years of engineering instincts came alive. A career building bridges, dams, and highways teaches you that answers often hide in forgotten records. Infrastructure remembers, and that memory sleeps in county archives and dusty filing cabinets. Saturday, I dug through my grandfather's boxes in the workshop, papers untouched since I'd moved back. The crackle of brittle pages revealed gold. His original 1943 mining claim included something rare, an exclusive easement for road and bridge maintenance, the only access in or out of Pine Ridge. On Monday, the courthouse confirmed it. Every filing since 1978 described the current bridge as resting on a private easement owned by the E. Blackwood estate. That bridge, the only lifeline for 47 luxury homes, belonged to me. Victoria, meanwhile, kept striking. She called an emergency HOA meeting Tuesday night, accusing me of blatant violations and demanding a $500 monthly fine for illegal encroachment. Under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights, neighbors sat pale and stiff as she clicked through slides like an executive delivering bad news. Most stayed silent, half too scared to draw her wrath, half avoiding the meeting entirely to keep their hands clean. "Mr. Blackwood has been trespassing on community green space for years," Victoria declared, with the confidence of someone who'd never once been challenged. His violations must be corrected immediately, with monthly fines applied until full compliance. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the strain of holding back my temper. My voice, though, stayed steady as bedrock. Victoria, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The survey is perfectly clear, Mr. Blackwood. Oh, it's clear, all right. I walked to the front and spread out my independent survey on the table. This survey, done by Becker and Associates, professionals who actually know how to read their equipment, shows your fence is 15 feet inside my property. Victoria's face turned crimson. That's impossible, I shot back. What's impossible, I shot back, is how your brother-in-law ever earned a surveying license. Out of a Cracker Jack box, maybe. Nervous laughter rolled through the room. Old Mr. Jenkins coughed and muttered just loud enough, "She's finally gone too far." Victoria slammed her laptop shut so hard I thought the screen would shatter. "The community has voted 7-2. You have 30
days to comply, or daily fines will escalate." I gave a calm nod and started toward the door. Then I turned back with the same smile that had rattled contractors for 40 years. "Victoria, you might want to check who actually owns that bridge you drove over to get here tonight. Spoiler alert, it's not the HOA." The flicker of confusion, followed by horror spreading across her face, was worth every dollar I'd wasted on those permit fees. Ever had a neighbor try to steal your land? Wait until you see what I did with that bridge. Victoria's response was swift and childish, like watching a toddler throw a tantrum armed with a law degree. By Thursday morning, she had 3 harassment campaigns running full speed. The first was the mailbox war. A certified letter arrived claiming my hand-carved oak mailbox, crafted from my own timber, failed to meet community aesthetic standards. I was ordered to replace it within 10 days with an approved model sold exclusively by Mountain Vista Landscaping. Curious, I called the company. The owner? None other than Bradley Thornfield, Victoria's charming son, who had apparently reinvented himself from college dropout to mailbox tycoon. His price for the community standard box? $340 for what was clearly a $40 piece of plastic with shiny lettering. Victoria had turned nepotism into a business model. Too bad she picked the wrong man to hustle. By Saturday, the rich scent of wood stain filled my workshop. I was carving a mailbox that could have been displayed in the Smithsonian. Mountain landscapes etched by hand, weather-sealed cedar polished to a shine. The mailbox I built had bronze hardware, intricate carvings, and every detail polished to perfection. It exceeded all their stated requirements and cost me only $30 in materials. Victoria's response? Wood isn't professional enough for Pine Ridge's image. Suddenly, craftsmanship itself was a violation. Next came the garbage games. Out of nowhere, Pine Ridge Waste Management skipped my pickup, citing route efficiency optimization. Odd how mine was the only house optimized off the schedule. Every Tuesday morning, the crunch of gravel under my boots became routine as I hauled trash to the community dumpster, which Victoria had conveniently placed half-way to Siberia. One morning, the truck driver, Pete, pulled me aside. "Mr. Blackwood," he whispered, scanning around nervously. "She called my boss, made threats about our contract. I'm sorry, man." Then came the firewood harassment. An anonymous complaint claimed my neatly stacked cords of firewood posed a fire hazard. Fire Marshal Rodriguez, a decent man stuck in Victoria's trap, inspected the pile. "This is the cleanest wood stack in the county," he said, shaking his head. "Somebody's turning my department into their personal revenge service." But here's where Victoria miscalculated. She started spreading rumors at Murphy's Diner, loudly declaring that my non-conforming cabin was wrecking property values. Problem for her was that Sarah Chen, a property rights lawyer, was having lunch at the next table. Sarah overheard every word and called me that afternoon. "Mr. Blackwood, I couldn't help noticing some troubling harassment patterns. Want to talk over coffee about your legal options?" While Victoria busied herself playing mailbox dictator, I was quietly building a case. Every encounter got logged with military precision. Every phone call was recorded. Colorado is a one-party consent state, and believe me, I was consenting. I requested 5 years of HOA meeting minutes and uncovered Victoria's greatest hits. The Kowalskis harassed over landscaping until they moved. Mrs. Patterson targeted with bogus health violations about her cat until she went into assisted living. The Garcias bullied for months over their vegetable garden until they sold at a loss. Victoria wasn't just a bully, she was a serial predator. The real bombshell came when Sarah dug into the bridge maintenance contract. County records showed $180,000 a year paid to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure LLC for upkeep. And who owned that LLC? Here's a hint. It rhymed with Victoria. For 15 years, she'd been stealing bridge maintenance money. That added up to $2.7 million plus interest, and I now had the power to shut down her entire scam with one phone call. The shuffle of legal documents became my lullaby as Sarah laid out my nuclear options. "Ezra, this isn't just harassment anymore," she told me. "We're talking wire fraud, embezzlement, even racketeering." Victoria's mask slipped when she called yet another emergency meeting, this time proposing a special assessment to buy out my property for $3,200, the exact cost of those permits she'd forced me into. Robbery with a gavel and a grin. The meeting was half empty. Victoria's rule of fear had worn people down until many stayed home. But Mrs. Holloway wasn't one of them. She stormed in like she was
hitting the beaches of Normandy, flanked by the Rodriguez family and Jake Morrison. "This harassment has to stop," she declared. She declared it with more strength than people half her age. "Ezra Blackwood is a good man, and we all know it." Victoria's mask cracked. "Mrs. Holloway, perhaps you don't understand what's at stake." "I understand bullying just fine," the old woman shot back. "Been dealing with it for 83 years." The taste of coming victory was sweeter than Margaret's apple pie as I watched Victoria's empire begin to crumble. But I kept quiet, jotting notes. Sometimes the smartest move is letting your enemy hang themselves with their own rope. After the meeting, Jake Morrison caught me in the parking lot. "Ezra, whatever you're planning, I'm in. We've all had enough." Mrs. Holloway gave a firm nod. Time to remind Victoria who really owns this mountain. I shook their hands, my mind turning to that bridge and the $2.7 million she'd siphoned away. Victoria thought she was playing chess with a grieving old man. She had no idea she'd sat down with a demolition expert. Her next move proved she had lost all sense. Instead of retreating after her disastrous meeting, she doubled down like a gambler betting the mortgage on snake eyes. Monday morning, I woke to construction, not the soft hammer of a neighbor fixing a fence, but the harsh clang of metal gates and electronic gear being mounted at the community entrance. By noon, Pine Ridge had a brand new gated system, keypads, cameras, and a guard shack that belonged in Guantanamo Bay. Victoria stood beside it in her designer coat, ordering workers like Napoleon in heels, if Napoleon carried a clipboard and wore Louis Vuitton. "Security upgrade," she announced, for anyone listening, for everyone's protection. The twist? My access code mysteriously expired that same afternoon. Returning from a supply run, I found myself locked out of my own neighborhood. The gate's red light blinked at me like a robotic middle finger, and the intercom crackled with a rent-a-cop who had clearly been briefed. "Sorry, sir, system error," he droned, about as apologetic as a tax collector. "Gonna take a few days to fix. Maybe contact the HOA president." The metallic tang of rage filled my mouth as I sat in my truck, watching neighbors drive past with codes that worked fine. This wasn't harassment anymore. Victoria had turned my home into Alcatraz, with me as the only inmate. Mrs. Holloway rolled down her window, gripping her steering wheel like she was ready to storm the gate with a rolling pin. "Ezra, this is criminal. I'm calling that woman right now." "Don't worry," I said, snapping photos with my phone. "She just handed me a felony case on a silver platter." While Victoria toasted her new electronic cage, I was already on the phone with Sarah Chen. She nearly spat out her coffee when I explained. "She locked you out, Ezra? That's unlawful restraint," Sarah said. "She just went from civil harassment to criminal charges faster than you can say stupid criminal." Deputy Martinez showed up within the hour, took one look at the gate blocking my driveway, and shook his head like he'd seen every kind of nonsense humans could invent. "Ma'am," he told Victoria, "you can't trap a property owner on his own land. That's false imprisonment, and it's a felony." Victoria's reply was peak entitled suburbanite. "Officer, I'm sure you don't understand the legal complexities of HOA governance and community safety protocols." "Lady, I understand handcuffs," Martinez snapped back. "Open the gate now." That's when I pulled the nuclear trigger. While Victoria argued with the deputy, Sarah was filing emergency injunctions and alerting the Colorado Department of Transportation about irregular bridge maintenance payments. And the DOT doesn't play around when highway funds disappear. Within 48 hours, forensic accountant Williams was tearing apart Pine Ridge's finances like a coroner examining a suspicious corpse. What he uncovered turned Victoria's petty harassment into a full-blown federal case. Her family had been running Pine Ridge like the Corleones ran Vegas, if the Corleones wore cardigans and drove Lexuses. The brother-in-law's surveys? $200,000 in phantom charges. Son Bradley's landscaping company? $150,000 in inflated contracts. Husband Marcus's legal fees? $89,000 for routine paperwork worth maybe $5,000. Add in the bridge payments, and Victoria had looted over $3.5 million from her neighbors. That night, the distinct grind of shredders came from Victoria's house. Looked like someone was hosting a midnight document barbecue. Too bad for her, Williams had already downloaded every file from the county archives. The community's reaction was like watching a dam burst. Jake Morrison called an emergency meeting at Murphy's Diner, and 23 residents showed up carrying receipts, invoices, and stories that could make any prosecutor drool. "She charged us $8,000 for emergency road repair," the Garcias fumed. Turned out it was her nephew dumping gravel into a pothole. Mrs. Patterson's daughter drove in from Denver with a folder full of bogus bills. "Mom paid $3,000 for community lighting upgrades," she said. "I found the same solar lights at Walmart for $89. The diner filled with angry voices as neighbors realized they hadn't just been robbed of money. Victoria had stolen their trust, their peace, their very community. But Victoria wasn't about to go quietly. Her next desperate move was to schedule an emergency Friday meeting, demanding the HOA buy bridge rights from me for $50,000, about 1% of what she had pocketed. By Thursday, local reporter Kate Morrison was already circling with questions about HOA corruption. The Jefferson County Tribune was prepping a front-page expose, "Queen of the Mountain: How One Woman Stole a Community's Soul." Friday evening, I sat on my porch, watching the mountains glow gold in the setting sun, thinking about my grandfather's honest bridge and the mountain of lies built on top of it. Tomorrow night, Victoria Thornfield was going to learn what happens when you corner a Blackwood on his own ridge. This was going to be entertaining. The shock that shifted the whole game arrived Tuesday morning in a manila envelope thick enough to choke a mule. Sarah Chen had been busy with her forensic accountant, and what they uncovered made Victoria's gate stunt look like jaywalking. "Ezra," Sarah said on the phone, her voice trembling with excitement, "you need to sit down for this and maybe grab something stronger than coffee." The audit exposed that Victoria hadn't just stolen community cash. She'd been running a criminal empire that made the Sopranos look like rookies. The bridge scam was just the appetizer in a full-course feast of fraud. The shuffle of papers filled my kitchen as I spread Sarah's evidence across my grandfather's oak table. Every project over the last 8 years was bloated, faked, or flat-out invented. Snow removal contract. Victoria's cousin billed $40,000 yearly for work worth $8,000. Emergency septic repairs. Brother-in-law's plumbing outfit invoiced $75,000 for replacing perfectly fine systems. Even the community newsletter was a racket. $15,000 a year for Victoria's personal propaganda rag. Marcus's firm charged legal fees that were mostly tutorials in theft. Bradley's landscaping scam turned $20 flowers into $500 invoices. The boy couldn't grow weeds, but he could sure grow receipts. Total theft, $847,000 drained from community funds, plus $2.7 million in bridge money. But then Sarah struck gold. That explained it all. Hidden in 1962 deeds, she'd found the true reason Victoria wanted me erased. My grandfather's original 40 acres had included the land Victoria lived on. He'd lost it in a poker hand to her father-in-law, Theodore Thornfield Sr. Family lore said Grandpa suspected cheating, but couldn't prove it. A broken straight against a suspiciously perfect full house. The taste of betrayal 6 decades old hit me as the puzzle locked together. Victoria had known about my bridge claim from the start. Her whole campaign wasn't about neighborhood rules. It was revenge for a poker game older than color TV, wrapped in the largest HOA fraud in Colorado history. The criminal scope was staggering. Williams, the accountant, called it organized crime in sweaters, a system of looting disguised as civic upgrades. Faked invoices, phantom jobs, kickbacks buried in contracts. Victoria's panic was showing in real time. Marcus had filed for divorce 2 weeks prior, citing irreconcilable differences. Lawyer code for "my wife's a crook and I'm bailing before the cuffs click shut." Bradley had scrambled to pull cash from his business accounts, only to learn the IRS had frozen everything pending audit. Apparently, paying taxes on stolen money hadn't crossed his landscaping prodigy. The balance of power had flipped completely. Victoria was no longer the hunter tormenting a lonely widower. She was a trapped embezzler staring down federal charges, civil suits, and the spectacular implosion of her stolen empire. The crunch of gravel in my driveway signaled County Commissioner Walsh, looking like he'd rather arm wrestle grizzlies than hold this talk. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, hat literally in hand, "we need to address Friday's meeting. There are certain irregularities needing urgent attention." Irregularities? Like calling the Titanic a minor boating mishap? "Commissioner," I said, offering him coffee, "what we need to cover is how Pine Ridge will elect a fresh HOA board and recover $3.5 million in stolen money." His relief was visible from orbit. The county had been sidestepping Victoria's political poll for years. Now they had a victim willing to fight and proof that would make prosecutors weep with delight. Friday night wouldn't be about bridge ownership anymore. It was about Victoria Thornfield's very public, very permanent downfall. Margaret always said,
Justice waited. She never mentioned how sweet it would taste when it finally came. Wednesday morning turned my grandfather's workshop into a command center worthy of the Pentagon. Sarah Chen showed up at dawn with 2 briefcases of evidence and a grin sharp enough to slice glass. "Ezra," she said, spreading files across my workbench like a general planning D-Day. "Victoria Thornfield just dealt us the legal version of a royal flush. Time to push all the chips in and watch her crumble." My team was small but deadlier than a pit of rattlers. Sarah Chen, property rights lawyer with 2 decades of demolishing crooked HOAs. Miguel Santos, forensic accountant and ex-FBI fraud hunter who dismantled 3 Ponzi schemes and 1 spectacularly corrupt casino. Rebecca Stone, civil rights attorney working pro bono because she'd grown up watching petty tyrants wreck decent families. And my ace up the sleeve, retired Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army buddy who knew every legal loophole in Colorado and a few that weren't in the books. The smell of hot coffee and looming justice filled the shop as we mapped our strategy. Boundary maps covered one wall. Flowcharts tracking Victoria's money laundering blanketed another. A timeline of 8 years of organized theft lined the third wall like a prosecutor's dream. "This isn't about your bridge anymore," Rebecca said, pointing at the files with the glee of a kid opening gifts. "Victoria has built us a perfect RICO case. We're talking federal racketeering." The financial play was devastating in its simplicity. I could legally shut the bridge tomorrow, isolating Pine Ridge like an island resort no one asked for. The structure needed $400,000 in deferred work, money Victoria had been pocketing while apparently funding her Botox habit instead. "Here's the beauty," Miguel said, his calculator clacking like a jackpot slot machine. "She owes you $2.7 million in bridge money, plus the community's $847,000 in stolen funds, plus triple damages for fraud." That put her liability north of $8 million. Meanwhile, Victoria was in what could generously be described as total collapse. Sources at the county courthouse said she'd stormed in Tuesday demanding to see someone in charge about rogue lawyers harassing her. When told the probe was legitimate, she reportedly ranted about crooked officials before peeling out in her Lexus. The community organizing was poetry in motion. Mrs. Holloway had mobilized her Bridge Club network, spreading truth faster than Victoria once spread lies. Every coffee meet, book circle, and grocery run became a strategy session. "Honey," she told me Thursday morning, "we've been suspicious for years. Her designer clothes while we're paying surprise fees. Her European trips every spring. We're not fools. We just needed someone willing to push back." Jake Morrison had united every working-class resident Victoria ever targeted. The alliance included builders, repairmen, teachers, and nurses, people who earned their living instead of stealing it from neighbors. Maria Rodriguez delivered evidence that would make prosecutors grin. Photos of landscaping upgrades that were nothing more than scattering wildflower seeds and billing $5,000 a yard. "She fined us for drying clothes outside," Maria said, her nurse's calm cracking into fury. "Called it unsightly. From a woman funding cosmetic surgery with our money while mocking our laundry." The clatter of keyboards became our evening chorus as we assembled presentations so damning they needed warning labels. Each padded invoice, every phony contract, every payoff was logged with precision that would impress the IRS. The media campaign was flawless. Reporter Kate Morrison wasn't just writing about HOA drama anymore. She was documenting the biggest small-town fraud case in Colorado. Denver TV stations rolled in with cameras. A true crime podcast titled Bridge to Nowhere was already in the works. Victoria's political shield evaporated faster than desert rain. Commissioner Walsh went public with a full-scale investigation into HOA corruption. The state attorney general was demanding answers about oversight and accountability. The wheeze of my printer spitting paper became the soundtrack of justice arriving. We prepared 47 identical evidence binders, one for each household, packed with Victoria's criminal greatest hits and breakdowns of what every family had lost. Bridge inspection reports confirmed my hunch. The structure required urgent work Victoria had pocketed funds for and ignored. Engineering studies proved I could legally shut it down for safety, trapping the community until someone came up with $400,000. Hamilton Gray offered the legal perspective.
"You don't need to crush Victoria," he said, studying the files with grim approval. "She's already done that herself. All we need to do is record the spectacular implosion." By Thursday night, everything was in place. Evidence organized, press notified, law enforcement.
Briefed, Victoria isolated and unraveling. Friday promised to be better than Netflix and twice as satisfying. Time to show her what happened when you picked the wrong mountain man. Victoria's spiral into criminal desperation kicked off Thursday morning when she hired a private investigator to dig into my past. Bad move. The PI, a greasy fellow named Kruger, who looked like he'd washed out of the academy twice, spent 3 days investigating me before having what looked like a full-blown crisis of conscience. "Mr. Blackwood," he muttered at my doorstep Friday morning, shifting like he wanted to sink through the porch, "I need to return Mrs. Thornfield's money and share what I found." My military service record and engineering credentials made me look like a model citizen compared to her crimes. But Kruger had stumbled on something worse: Victoria's history of HOA takeovers in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Boulder. "She's a repeat offender," he said, handing over a fat file. "Same method every time. Seize the board, funnel contracts to family, bleed the place dry, then vanish before indictments land." The shuffle of incriminating documents felt like opening presents as I scanned photos and testimonies from her former victims. Still, Victoria wasn't finished making disastrous choices. That afternoon, she handed County Inspector Williams an envelope stuffed with $5,000 cash and hinted my cabin might need immediate condemnation. Williams, a seasoned civil servant with no patience for crooks, reported the bribe attempt straight to the DA. "Ma'am," he told her, "I've seen desperate folks before, but bribing an inspector is a new tier of stupid. Expect a visit from men with badges." While she panicked, I was playing chess. Security cameras went up around the bridge, and I contracted Peterson Engineering for a full inspection. Their findings were devastating: years of ignored maintenance, drainage failures threatening the foundation, railings below code. Total repair cost? The exact $400,000 Victoria had siphoned. The hum of Peterson's instruments echoed down the valley, recording a decade of theft disguised as negligence. Meanwhile, Sarah Chen coordinated with the Colorado Department of Transportation, securing authority to close the bridge if conditions warranted. CDOT jumped at the chance, eager to stop unknowingly bankrolling Victoria's shopping sprees with highway funds. At the same time, Victoria's family was crumbling, disintegrated spectacularly. Marcus left Tuesday night, carrying only his law books and whatever pride he had left. Bradley scrambled to unload his sham landscaping company before the IRS seized every last cent. Even Victoria's sister Patricia, once a Pine Ridge board member, quit with a letter that basically read, "I refuse to be tied to this criminal any longer." Her last-ditch effort was intimidation. Anonymous threats turned up in the mailboxes of my supporters, warning of consequences for siding with troublemakers. Fake social media accounts leaked personal info about Maria Rodriguez and Jake Morrison, posting thinly veiled threats. The scrape of security cameras being mounted in the gray morning hours became my new soundtrack as I cataloged every dirty trick. Ironically, Victoria was piling up evidence against herself quicker than a law textbook could outline offenses. But her gravest miscalculation was overlooking Mrs. Holloway's tech-savvy grandson, Tommy, who traced the anonymous accounts to Victoria's home IP address in 20 minutes flat. "Grandma," he grinned at dinner, "your HOA president sucks at cybercrime." The forensics exposed her, running fake accounts, sending threats, even posting bogus business reviews, all from her own computer. She'd left a digital trail that prosecutors would dance over. Deputies nabbed Bradley Tuesday afternoon after he was caught on 3 cameras spray painting "traitors" across the Rodriguez's car. He pled guilty instantly, clearly hoping to shave down whatever sentence his mother was barreling toward.
The shuffle of legal documents being served became Pine Ridge's new daily rhythm as subpoenas hit every ally she had left. Charges stacked up faster than she could hire defense attorneys. By Wednesday, Victoria was holding emergency meetings no one attended, sending unanswered emails and barking out threats no one believed. Her dictatorship had collapsed into a one-woman pity party no one cared to watch. The final absurdity came when she phoned the FBI to report me as a domestic terrorist threatening critical infrastructure. After 5 minutes, the agent reportedly advised her to invest in a strong criminal defense lawyer. By Thursday night, I sat on my porch, watching her windows glow into dawn as she shredded papers and packed bags. Tomorrow's community meeting would be her public execution, so to speak. Margaret always said, desperate people make desperate choices. She never added how entertaining those choices could be from the sidelines.
Victoria's last days of freedom were a masterclass in self-destruction. Instead of slipping away quietly, she opted for scorched earth, convinced that if she couldn't keep Pine Ridge, no one could. Monday morning unveiled her most deranged plot yet, dissolving the entire HOA to escape accountability. She submitted emergency paperwork to the county, insisting that irreconcilable disputes and safety concerns demanded the immediate termination of Pine Ridge Estates as a legal body. Her reasoning was spectacularly foolish. No HOA, she believed, meant no embezzlement charges. Unfortunately for her, dissolved organizations don't wipe away felony records, and stolen money doesn't magically reappear just because paperwork is filed. The stench of desperation lingered over Pine Ridge like burning rubber as Victoria's public antics became more erratic. Tuesday at Murphy's Diner, she was seen shouting at the owner to stop serving people, destroying our community. When Murphy reminded her that feeding customers was literally his livelihood, she shrieked about harassment by radicals and stormed out without paying. By Wednesday, the fake police reports rolled in. She dialed 911, accusing me of making terroristic threats against local infrastructure because I'd mentioned my bridge ownership at the grocery store. She flagged suspicious activity at my workshop because I was building evidence boards. She even reported me for trespassing while walking on my own land. Sheriff Martinez, who'd tolerated her hysteria for weeks, finally snapped. "Ma'am, filing false reports is a crime. Do it again and you'll be arrested for abusing emergency services." Her crowning act of idiocy came when she tried unloading her mansion at 40% under market value, desperate to flee before property prices cratered. Not one buyer bid after learning the property's legal baggage. "Would you buy a house," Jake Morrison joked, "where the only exit road belongs to the neighbor the seller's been harassing for months?" Soon, the rumble of moving trucks became Pine Ridge's soundtrack as Victoria scrambled to liquidate before seizure. But the court had already frozen her accounts, leaving her helpless as movers hauled away furniture she could no longer afford. The media battle escalated when she phoned Channel 7, claiming she was a victim of a deranged neighbor with mental health problems. Reporter Jessica Walsh showed up expecting a sob story, only to uncover Colorado's biggest municipal fraud case. "Mrs. Thornfield," Walsh said during what Victoria assumed was a friendly interview, "are you aware federal investigators have named you the prime suspect in a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme?" Victoria's on-camera collapse went viral within hours. Her screaming about fake news and conspiracies, framed by the mansion she'd bought with stolen HOA money, became a viral image of entitled corruption. The rebellion peaked Thursday when Victoria stormed onto my property uninvited, demanding negotiations to fix this misunderstanding. Somehow she believed her charm and entitlement could erase federal charges. "Ezra," she pleaded on my porch, "decked out in clothing worth more than most cars. Surely reasonable people can work this out." "Victoria," I answered, camera rolling to capture every word, "reasonable people don't steal $3.5 million from their neighbors." Her composure snapped. "You don't know what you've done," she screamed. "I'll burn this place down before I let you destroy me." Her trembling voice betrayed the realization that consequences were unavoidable.
Mrs. Holloway, out for her daily walk, stopped just in time to witness Victoria's full-scale meltdown. "Honey," the old woman remarked with devastating softness, "what you built was lies on top of theft. It was bound to collapse." Victoria answered with threats of lawsuits against everyone in this so-called conspiracy. When I reminded her that her husband had filed for divorce and her son was already facing criminal charges, she exploded, shouting about corrupt judges and rigged systems. The stage was set for Friday night's emergency meeting, her final chance to spin the story before indictments landed. She blasted emails to every resident, promising explosive truths about sinister forces undermining Pine Ridge. What she didn't realize was that 43 of 47 households already had our evidence packets in hand. The revelations weren't going to be about me, they'd be about her. The taste of certain victory was sweeter than Margaret's apple pie. Tomorrow night, Victoria Thornfield would face a room full of neighbors she'd stolen from while we held proof of every theft. Friday evening, I sat on my porch, watching lights flicker late in Victoria's windows as she likely rehearsed lies. The mountain
Air was still, except for wind in the pines and the distant sound of justice rolling closer. Margaret always said truth finds a way. She never said how gratifying it would feel to watch it arrive. The Pine Ridge Community Center Friday night resembled both a town hall and a public trial. 200 people jammed into a room built for 50 while regional TV crews set up gear and deputies took their positions. Victoria showed up fashionably late in her Lexus, convinced she still controlled the stage. She wore an ivory suit that probably cost more than a neighbor's mortgage, strutting with the misplaced poise of someone who'd never faced consequences. The air buzzed as she walked to the podium like she was claiming an award rather than standing before furious neighbors with evidence in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, voice laced with the false authority she'd lived on for years, "I've called this emergency meeting to confront the malicious attacks on your elected leadership and the dangerous radicals threatening our safety." The reaction was instant and ugly. "Where's our money, thief?" people shouted. Maria Rodriguez rose, holding her evidence packet like a dagger. "Victoria, we know about the fake landscaping. We know about the bridge fund. We know everything." Victoria's mask slipped, but she pushed forward with her rehearsed script. "These are the delusions of a troubled individual who—" Enough. My voice sliced through hers, clean as a blade. The room went silent as I stood with a bulging manila folder heavy enough to crush denial. My boots echoed across the floorboards as I advanced. Behind me, Sarah Chen rolled in a cart stacked with evidence boxes. Miguel Santos opened his laptop, linking it to the overhead projector. Reinforcements had arrived. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to the crowd, "let me tell you a story about a bridge." From the folder, I lifted my grandfather's 1943 mining claim and held it up. "This deed proves my family has owned the bridge connecting Pine Ridge to the outside world for 81 years." Gasps rippled. Victoria's face shifted from smug to bewildered to terrified in 3 heartbeats. "For 15 years," I continued, "the Colorado Department of Transportation had been paying bridge maintenance fees to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure, LLC, Victoria's shell company. She'd siphoned $2.7 million that rightfully belonged to me." On the projector, financial records lit the screen, each fraudulent payment glowing like neon evidence. The murmurs in the room swelled into an outraged roar as neighbors absorbed the scale of her theft. "And that's not the half of it," I continued, savoring the panic on her face. "Mrs. Thornfield has been operating a racket dressed up as community progress. Every project, every contract, every special levy, all crafted to fatten her family's bank accounts." Miguel advanced, laser pointer flicking across the charts that mapped Victoria's embezzlement ring.
Total theft from community coffers, $847,000 in 8 years. Her brother-in-law's survey firm, her son's landscaping scam, her husband's padded legal invoices, all inflated beyond reason. Victoria tried to cut in. "These papers are forged. This is a setup, a conspiracy to—" "Ma'am," Sheriff Martinez interrupted, stepping forward, cuffs glinting in the harsh light. "You have the right to remain silent. I strongly advise you to use it." Applause exploded through the hall as Martinez read her charges. Embezzlement, fraud, bribery, false reports, racketeering. Federal prosecutors were already drafting additional counts of wire fraud and money laundering. The snap of metal around her wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard since Margaret's laugh. The woman who'd tried to ruin me was finally being dragged into the justice she'd earned. "You can't do this!" Victoria shrieked as deputies escorted her toward the exit. "I'll appeal! I'll fight!" "Victoria," I called out, cutting her rant short, "save your breath. You're going to need a first-rate lawyer." The crowd's laughter trailed her out into the flashing cameras and the waiting patrol car, a convoy carrying away the last of her terror. Commissioner Walsh then took the stage, declaring the immediate dissolution of Victoria's HOA board and the installation of an interim committee. Federal and county prosecutors, he promised, would claw back stolen funds for the people. "Mr. Blackwood," he asked, turning to me, "what are your plans for bridge access?" Rising, I scanned the weary but hopeful faces of neighbors who'd endured her reign. "The bridge stays open, but Pine Ridge will buy rightful ownership at fair market price, $50,000. Every penny will go to a scholarship fund." The ovation thundered for 5 minutes. Mrs. Holloway dabbed at tears. Jake Morrison pumped a victorious fist. Maria Rodriguez clutched her children, finally unburdened. Camera flashes immortalized the moment Pine Ridge reclaimed its dignity from a thief. Outside, Victoria's cruiser slipped into the mountain dark, carrying off 8 years of fear and corruption. Justice had arrived in Pine Ridge, and it came with handcuffs. 1 month later, Victoria Thornfield appeared in Jefferson County Court dressed in an orange jumpsuit that clashed miserably with her taste for couture. She entered guilty pleas to fraud, embezzlement, and bribery rather than endure a months-long trial that would have shredded her reputation further. Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army comrade, now presiding, had no sympathy for petty despots who plundered neighbors. He handed down 3 years in state prison, $3.5 million in restitution, and 500 hours of roadside cleanup. Marcus had already slunk off to Denver, while Bradley was earning minimum wage at a gas station, discovering what honest labor looked like for the first time. The echoes of children's laughter soon replaced the silence around Victoria's foreclosed mansion. The community purchased it and turned the grounds into Pine Ridge's first public park, with playgrounds, picnic areas, and a memorial garden honoring integrity and cooperation. The bridge's long-delayed restoration became the pride of Pine Ridge. Residents gave weekends to pour concrete and paint railings. Jake Morrison ran the construction effort. Mrs. Holloway organized meal trains for volunteers. Maria Rodriguez patched scraped hands and strained muscles with her nursing expertise. The newly elected HOA board, chosen in a landslide for honesty, rolled out radical changes, competitive bids, transparent books, and monthly meetings with real public input. The turnaround was dramatic. Jobs Victoria once inflated to $50,000 now cost just $8,000 when handled by honest contractors glad for legitimate pay. Within 6 months, property values jumped 15% as news spread of Pine Ridge's rebirth from corruption into cooperation. Families sought homes precisely because of its reputation for open governance. The waiting list stretched longer than a grocery line in a blizzard. My own journey shocked me most of all. Solitary grief had been replaced by reluctant leadership, as neighbors came seeking counsel on everything from contracts to town politics. My workshop evolved into a gathering spot where problems were solved face to face, the old-fashioned way. The scent of coffee and camaraderie replaced the bitterness of conflict as Pine Ridge healed from Victoria's shadow. Mrs. Holloway's widowed sister, Sarah, and I grew closer, trading stories of loss, resilience, and the unexpected second chances life sometimes offers. The ripple spread well beyond our valley. Bridgegate became a property law case study nationwide. The Colorado legislature passed the Pine Ridge Act, mandating financial audits and background checks for HOA boards. Across the state, other neighborhoods mired in corruption began demanding. Requests for guidance on battling small-time tyrants started pouring in. Documentary filmmaker Rebecca Martinez even bought the rights to our saga for an indie film called The Bridge to Justice. The advance went straight into Pine Ridge's scholarship fund, which had already sent 3 kids to college on full rides. Ironically, Victoria's stolen money ended up funding the next generation's education. Local businesses thrived without her intimidation tactics or shady kickback deals. Murphy's Diner became the heart of the community, hosting monthly democracy dinners where neighbors hashed out issues over meatloaf and pie. The economic revival was undeniable. Honest governance, it turned out, was great for business. Justice came laced with irony. Victoria was paroled after 18 months for good behavior, sentenced to a studio apartment and a retail job, permanently banned from serving on any board or nonprofit. She became the living definition of unchecked greed's consequences. The clean mountain air now carried the sounds of a thriving town. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the peaks glow with sunset, my phone rang. Another call from a desperate homeowner in Arizona, this time about HOA corruption tied to water rights. Mrs. Holloway, now Pine Ridge's duly elected president, dropped by with fresh apple pie and reassurance. "Ezra, they need you. We're fine here." I looked at the bridge arching across the valley, solid, maintained, and honestly managed, connecting homes where neighbors spoke kindly instead of scheming. "What do you think, Margaret?" I whispered into the wind. The reply came in children's laughter from Victoria's former garden, echoing above the river running under an honest bridge. It was time to help another community learn that the underdog can win if they fight with strategy, not rage. Share your HOA horror story below. Your experience might give someone else the courage to resist. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people standing tall against corrupt authority. Because sometimes justice comes in work boots and carries a surveyor's kit.